Hello and welcome to Technicians Update number 5. In it we'll take a look at the new Metro Cabriolet and at some of the 94.5-year model changes you'll find on the rest of the car range. These include the introduction of airbags and electronic immobilisation systems on some models and changes to anti-lock braking. We'll start with the Metro Cabriolet. This is the third cabriolet we've introduced in recent years, following the success of the 200 and Mini. Let's look at some of its features first. The hood is power operated and raising and lowering is simplicity itself. The two catches on the header rail are just like the Mini and 200 cabriolets. To lower the hood, first release the catches by pressing the release buttons and pulling the locking handles down. When both locking hooks have been released, push the handles back up. Then make sure the handbrake is on. Turn the ignition to position 2 and press the down button on the instrument panel until the hood is fully lowered. Incidentally, I'm sure I don't have to remind you that you should never try to raise or lower the hood while the car is moving. Before raising it, you must first lower all the side windows a couple of turns to make sure they don't foul the hood while it's rising. You'll see these symbols to remind the owner. Then release the hood catches, handbrake on, ignition in position 2, and press the up button. When the hood has risen fully, push the hooks forward to position them in their holes in the header rail. Then press the locking handles upwards. The hood is now secured and the side windows can be closed. A tonneau cover is supplied to fit over the hood when it's down. It's stored in a bag in the boot. To fit it, first make sure the locking handles are in the locked position. Then put the cover over the hood and pull it into place. Secure it with the press studs around the outside, and there are two also on the parcel shelf inside, and there are two 10X fasteners, one on each side. They're secured by pulling the centre button out. Incidentally, the rear screen is secured by Velcro strips on either side and by a zip fastener across the top. It should never be open when the car is being driven because of the danger of exhaust fumes being drawn into the car. The design is simply to make the screen easy to remove if it has to be renewed at any time. It's secured across the bottom by a series of Torx screws. The anti-theft system is similar to the Metro Saloon, but it has the addition of a Doppler volumetric sensor, which is fitted just behind the cassette storage rack. It protects the inside of the car regardless of whether the hood is up or down, and it works in the same way as the Mini Cabriolet. You'll have already seen the Mini system in Technicians Update number 4. The rear seat squab is released in a similar way to the 200 Coupe by a pull handle inside the boot. Then it folds forward like the Saloon Metro. While we're in this area, a quick word about the rear seat belts, and in particular the floor-mounted locks. Due to width limitations, the right-hand belt must be attached to the left-hand lock, and the left-hand belt to the right-hand lock. So when you unfold the seat, you must thread the locks through like this so that they cross over. Specially designed lock catches in the belts mean that it's impossible to engage the right-hand belt in the right-hand lock and vice versa. Inside the boot, lift the floor covering to reach the spare wheel. It's easier to get out if you fold the rear seat forward. Then, after you've undone the clamp, this handy strap is provided to help lift the wheel. So don't forget to put the strap onto the changed wheel before lowering it in. And these symbols remind the owner how to remove the wheel. Now let's look at some of the technical features of the Metro Cabriolet. Like any other saloon converted to soft top, when the metal roof is cut off, a considerable amount of the body's strength is removed and has to be replaced. On the Metro, this is done more than adequately. First, the box section sills are enlarged and strengthened. Then there is this massive box section transversely across the floor of the car, and another one which forms this parcel shelf and locates the two radio speakers. Then there are a number of other strengthened areas, like the stiffener under the front wheel arch on each side, and another one in the footwells. The result is a very strong, rigid body structure. Now the doors. You'll have already noticed that the windows are frameless, so this concept means that considerable attention has to be paid to the guides to ensure that the glass will move up accurately into the hood frame and avoid any water leaks. We'll show you how this is done a little later when we talk about adjustments. An electrically controlled hydraulic pump operates the hood and is located inside the boot on the left-hand side. It pumps hydraulic fluid to either end of two rams connected between the body and the hood frame. The fluid reservoir is at the bottom of the pump. If an electrical or hydraulic fault should develop, then the hood can be opened or closed manually. To do it, you must first turn this T-shaped screw on the pump to release the pressure in the system. The screw can be accessed through this flap. Slowly turn the screw anti-clockwise by 4 complete turns. Then manually raise or lower the hood, but don't do it any faster than the power operation. And don't forget that if the manual operation has been used, you must re-tighten the screw before the power operation can be used again. Incidentally, if air gets into the system, there is a procedure to bleed it. The electrical connection to the pump passes through this 30-amp fuse, which is located in position 8 in the fuse box. The hood frame hinges at this point on both sides. It's positively located to the body by a dowel and secured with these 3 Torx screws. Now a word about cleaning. The rear screen is susceptible to scratching from dirt and grit, so it's important it's washed frequently. And in particular, don't open or close the hood if it is very dirty. If you get the chance, have a look in the owner's handbook. You'll find a lot of useful information relating to care of the hood. Before we finish with the Cabriolet, let's just take a few minutes to talk about adjustments. There's considerable inbuilt adjustment flexibility to keep wind noise and water ingress problems to a minimum. We'll start with the door glass. The objectives are these. It has to lie parallel with the A-post sealing rubber, fit snugly against it all the way up, behind the flip of the seal, and it must rise to the correct height to reach the cantrail seal on the hood. To achieve this, there are these adjusters at the front and rear of the lift channel. Adjust them equally and the glass height will alter. Adjust one or the other and the glass will tilt forwards or backwards. Then there are these adjusters attached to the vertical channels. They allow you to tilt the glass in or out. And in addition, they both have adjustable cams to eliminate excessive play of the glass in the channels. Next, the quarter glasses, which also have full adjustment. By slackening all 6 fixings which secure the glass mounting frame to the body, you can see here that the glass can be moved forward and back, angled forward and back, tilted in or out, or lifted up or down, so you can adjust it all ways. To lie parallel to the door glass, wind smoothly up so it lies snugly against the inside of the door glass, and when it is fully up, it's level with the door glass at the top. Finally, the cantrail seals. They all fit in slotted mountings so they can be adjusted in or out to lie correctly against the door and quarter glasses. One final thought, never attempt to alter the position of these brackets at the front of the hood. They've been preset at the factory and must not be touched. Well, that completes our look at the exciting new Metro Cabriolet, a car which is destined to have great appeal to all age groups. Now let's move on to look at a number of improvements we've made to the alarm systems on the 200, 400, 600 and 800 models. For some time now we've had perimetric alarms on these cars. Perimetric being the system covering the opening of bonnet, boot or tailgate, doors, front door sill switches and the ignition. And we've had volumetric alarms on all except the 600. Volumetric is the system that senses air movement inside the vehicle. Well, the 600 has also got the volumetric system now. In addition, we've added electronic immobilisation to all vehicles. In effect, this means the engine will not run while the system is armed. This electronic immobilisation is built into the engine ECU and cannot be tampered with. Hot wiring won't work, and even if the thief opens the bonnet to try rewiring the ECU, he will still not be able to start the engine. Two methods are possible as before to lock and unlock the car, either using the key or the remote control. Incidentally, on the 200s and 400s, the remote control is now an RF handset, standing for radio frequency. This means that the driver doesn't have to point the remote control at the receiver, as he has to do with the infrared handset. When the RF handset is operated, the LED on the fascia will flash rapidly for 10 seconds, called the confirm mode, which confirms that the alarm system is activated. The LED then decreases its flash rate, called the confidence mode, and continues to flash at this rate until the system is deactivated. If there's been a mislock, for example, one of the doors has not closed properly, the LED does not go through the confirm mode, but instead remains off for those 10 seconds before flashing at the slower confidence mode. As I said, we still have the two methods of locking the car. The effect is not quite the same on all the models, so we'll look at the 200s and 400s first. If the key is used to lock the car, everything is activated except the volumetric sensor. This means, for example, that the household pet can be left to wander freely without triggering the alarm. However, if the RF handset is used, everything is activated and the animal will set it off. To unlock, if the key is used, the alarm will be disabled, but not the engine immobilisation, so the engine cannot be started. The RF handset must be used to disable the alarms and mobilise the engine ECU. Of course, the driver can also regain control using his key access code. We'll look at this procedure in a few moments, but first a word about 600 and 800 security. They're similar to the 200 and 400, but not quite the same. If the key is used, it will lock and unlock the vehicle, and the engine ECU will be immobilised, but the volumetric sensor will not have been activated. The handset will lock and unlock the vehicle, activate and deactivate the volumetric alarm, and immobilise and mobilise the engine ECU. But if the handset has been used to lock the car, and the driver then uses the key to unlock it, the engine will remain immobilised. From what we've just said, you'll understand that the driver has got a problem if he locks the car with the RF remote and then loses it. Particularly on the 200s and 400s. The key will open the car, but the engine will still be immobilised. But as we said just now, it is still possible to get it going again if he or you know the emergency key access code shown on the security card he was given when he bought the car. If he's lost the card, your microcheck can be used to interrogate the alarm system and obtain the number. When you've found the number, you use it like this. The procedure is the same for all models except the start point. On the 200s and 400s, the driver's door must be closed and locked. On 600s, the door is open, and on 800s, the door is closed. From that point on, the procedure is the same for all. Do it like this. The key code for the car we're working on is 2132. To enter it, first turn the key to the unlock position, the number of times shown by the first digit of the code, in this example twice. Incidentally, after each turning movement, you must allow the key to return exactly to the vertical position. Next, you enter the second digit, 1 in our example, by turning the key once to the lock position. To enter the third digit, 3, turn it 3 times to the unlock position. And finally, the fourth digit, in this case 2, by turning it twice to the lock position. The code is now entered, so turn the key to the unlock position to unlock the car. If you have got it right, the alarm indicator light will stop flashing to show that you've successfully disarmed the ECU, and the engine can now be started in the normal way. But remember to tell the driver that the engine immobilisation system will remain disarmed until the remote is used again. Of course, if he finds the handset in the meantime, he can use it to reset the system. If you get the coding procedure wrong, the vehicle will tell you, and you can have 2 more attempts. After that, the system defaults, and you'll have to wait for 10 minutes before you can try again. One final point before we leave the alarm systems. If at any time you have to renew one of the latest engine management ECUs or an anti-theft ECU, you must remember to reprogram it using your microcheck. If you don't, the engine won't run. Now we'll look at changes that have been made to restraint systems. We'll start by examining the seatbelt pre-tension system that's been introduced on the 200s and 400s. This safety device is fitted to both front seats. In a frontal collision at more than 19 miles an hour, the system is triggered and the seatbelt stalk immediately contracts by approximately 70 millimetres. The effect of this is to reduce the amount of forward body movement on impact and thus lessen the chance of serious injury. This is the power tube. It contains a very powerful spring and an inertia detection device which registers the impact and triggers the spring immediately. The spring is connected to this cable, which passes through this lock tube and around a pulley to the seatbelt stalk. In an accident, the stalk is pulled down by the cable, which is then held by the lock tube. It's important to know that once the system has been triggered, it cannot be reset and has to be renewed as an assembly. If, for example, you have to remove a seat for any reason, you must take care not to trigger it. So, take a seat out like this. Slide the seat fully forward and remove this protective cover from the end of the power tube. Under it, you'll find this service key. Take it off and fit it here in the power tube. As long as the key is fitted in this position, the system is immobilised and the seat can be removed with safety. If you turn the seat upside down, it's not difficult to remove the pre-tensioner, but don't drop it and don't remove the service key. As we said before, you can't reset the system and the owner won't be happy to fork out for a new one because of your clumsiness. When you've refitted the seat, don't forget to rearm the system by putting the key back to its storage position and replace the protective cover. Incidentally, it's very difficult to refit the cover if the key is still in the immobilised position. The next new safety feature we'll look at is the Airbag System, which has been introduced on the 200s and 400s. It's fitted on the driver's side and all the main components are located in the steering wheel. If there's a front impact of more than 19 miles an hour, the airbag will inflate instantaneously and come out through tear lines in the pad. Once the airbag has inflated and done its job of protecting the driver at impact, it'll automatically deflate again so he can see where he is. A supplementary restraint system warning light, SRS for short, is located near the bottom of the steering wheel centre pad to indicate whether the system is working. Each time the ignition is switched on, the SRS light will come on for about 2.5 seconds and then go out. This tells you the system is working correctly. If a fault develops, the SRS will either stay on continuously after the ignition is turned on, or will fail to come on at all. If the light doesn't come on, then the first thing to check would be the fuse. It's a 10-amp fuse identified on the fuse box label as SRS, and it has a yellow cover. If you have to get into the airbag system itself, it's not difficult, but first you must turn off the ignition and disconnect the battery. After doing that, you must wait for at least 10 minutes before working on the system. This is to give the energy reserve capacitor inside the airbag time to fully discharge and allow the system to be worked on safely. Once 10 minutes are up, take out these two screws to remove the steering wheel centre pad. Now you can see the airbag. Then, if you unclip this cable, you can get to the ECU. Incidentally, it's shock sensitive and must be handled with care. Don't fit it if you think it's been dropped. And you should never try to repair any of the airbag system components. They must always be renewed. Refitting is straightforward, but make sure you locate the cable correctly so it won't snag when the wheel is turned. Now let's look at some of the changes that have been made to the Rover 600 range, and we'll start with the airbag system. Up to now, we've fitted the SRS II system, which has an airbag on the driver's side only. But now we can offer a system with the airbag on the passenger side too, and it's called the SRS III system. The main components in the system are the SRS unit located in the centre console, the driver's airbag in the steering wheel with a cable reel underneath it, and a passenger airbag in the fascia. The SRS warning light is in the instrument panel. The heart of the system is the SRS unit. It contains sensors and a microprocessor. The sensors react to the collision impact and signal the microprocessor, which computes them and triggers the airbags to inflate. The SRS unit also contains a self-diagnosis circuit. When the ignition is turned on, the SRS warning light illuminates and then goes out after about 6 seconds if the system's working normally. If the light doesn't come on, or doesn't go out after 6 seconds, or comes on while driving, it indicates a fault which must be investigated as soon as possible. Do it like this. First, you have to locate the service check connector under the fascia on the passenger's side. It's a blue 2-pin connector and must not be confused with another blue connector near it, which has 3 pins. Make sure the ignition is turned off, then bridge the terminals of the connector. Now turn the ignition on. The SRS warning light will come on for about 6 seconds, then go out. Immediately after that, it'll start to blink the diagnostic trouble code, or DTC, to identify the fault. If the fault is a continuous failure, the DTC will be indicated repeatedly. If it's an intermittent failure, the light will indicate the fault once, then stay on. If there is more than one fault, for example a continuous failure and an intermittent failure, both DTCs will be indicated as continuous failures. If the system is normal, that is, no DTC, the light will show continuous short blinks. After you've rectified the fault, you then have to erase the DTC memory, otherwise it'll continue to register it. You can erase the memory by turning the ignition off, then remove the bridge in the service check connector. Locate the memory erase signal connector, it's this 2-pin connector under the fascia on the driver's side, and bridge its terminals. Turn the ignition on. The SRS warning light will come on for about 6 seconds. When it goes off, you must remove the bridge you just fitted to the memory erase connector within 4 seconds. The SRS light will then come on again, and you must reconnect the bridge within 4 seconds. The SRS light will go out again, and then you only have a maximum of a further 4 seconds to finally remove the bridge. If you've done it right, the SRS light will blink twice to tell you that the memory has been erased. If for any reason you have to remove the steering wheel, you must first turn the steering to put the road wheels in the straight ahead position. Then remove the centre pad, complete with its airbag. When refitting, it's important to fit the cable reel correctly. Turn it clockwise until it stops. Then turn it anti-clockwise by approximately 2 turns until this yellow gear tooth lines up with the alignment mark on the cover. And the arrow mark on the reel label points upwards. It's very important that both these marks align, or the cable will not operate correctly. So much for the SRS III airbag system. So let's move on to look at some of the new chassis features on the Rover 600. The T-Series turbo engine has been introduced, and this has required a number of changes. For example, the cylinder block has been adapted to take in a new sump and front engine mounting bracket. The special sump has a torque rod location. The rod goes from the sump to the suspension rear beam. There are new exhaust manifold fixings and new lightweight pistons. The power steering pump has a valve change to suit the Honda steering system. The power unit is fitted with the gearbox on the left-hand side of the engine bay. That is opposite to the Honda unit, and all the front suspension beams have been changed to accommodate the new unit. Incidentally, it's essential that when you use a trolley jack at the front of the car, you must jack here under the towing eye at the front of the centre beam. If you jack anywhere else, you'll cause damage. The suspension is modified to give a sports tune, new front springs and dampers, and a stiffer rear anti-roll bar, along with the new 16-inch alloy wheels with Pirelli tyres. We recommend that Pirelli replacements should always be fitted. The 2.3-litre 600 is now fitted with a cruise control system similar to the 800. The ECU is located on the driver's side at the bottom of the A-post. Set and resume switches are on the steering wheel, providing instructions to the ECU through a slip ring. The main cruise on switch is combined with the heated rear window switch in the fascia. The Bosch ABS 2E anti-lock braking system is fitted to Rover engine 600s and it uses a fixed relays modulator. Don't forget that although the relays don't seem to be rigidly fixed on this type of modulator, you must not try to remove them. You can identify the modulator by its cover, which is level with the top of the modulator valve chamber. On Honda engine 600s, a BY4 anti-lock braking system is now fitted when specified. It's a new system, so we'll look at it in more detail. The hydraulics are all in one assembly. An ECU is located underneath a centre console. Incidentally, to service the ECU, you must remove the complete centre console. Don't attempt to prise up the gear lever veneer finisher, you'll break it. The ECU operation is similar to the previous system. Its main function being the logic section, taking inputs from the wheel sensors, calculating the vehicle reference speed and controlling the modulator solenoid valves. Its sub-functions are to control the modulator pump, the fail-safe relays and the self-diagnosis system. The construction and function of the pulsars and wheel speed sensors hasn't changed, and an air gap of 0.4 to 1 millimetre applies to all the wheels. As I said before, the hydraulics are all in one assembly, this modulator. It contains the pump to supply high-pressure fluid, an accumulator to store it, a pressure switch to control accumulator pressure, and then the solenoid valves, pistons, etc., to control pressure to the brake calipers. Fail-safe relays for the system are behind the fuse and relay box at the right-hand rear of the engine bay. If a fault is detected, the relays are de-energised, which in turn cuts the electrical supply to the solenoid valves. They're then prevented from operating and the ABS system is deactivated. Now a word about diagnosis. You'll find the maintenance and diagnostic connector under the passenger seat. It's used for microcheck simulation testing and when bleeding the high-pressure system. You'll find the diagnostic connector for fault codes at the bottom of the A post, the left-hand A post on the right-hand drive cars like this one, and at the right-hand post on left-hand drives. Incidentally, make sure you find the 2-pin connector and not the 3-pin connector near it. To make the diagnosis, first bridge the fault code's diagnostic connector and switch on the ignition. Don't start the engine. The ABS warning light will come on for 2 seconds to check that the bulb is working and then go out. After 2 more seconds, the light will then flash any fault codes present in the ECU, up to a maximum of 3, each separated by a 5-second pause. If you want to repeat the codes, turn the ignition off and on again. When you're ready to clear the ECU memory, simply remove fuse B2 in the ABS relay and fuse box. It's the middle fuse in this row. Just keep it out for more than 3 seconds, and don't forget to take out the bridge in the diagnostic connector. Incidentally, if you're using microcheck, it can only see hard faults. That is, faults that are present at the time it's used. If the vehicle has an intermittent fault, it will not necessarily be present when microcheck is on. But you can still identify that fault by looking at the warning light flash code. Next, checks and servicing. If you need to do any work on the modulator fluid system, you must relieve the high fluid pressure like this. Remove the bleed nipple cap, fit a wrench to the nipple, connect a bleed tube and slowly open the nipple up to a 1/4 of a turn. Don't open it quickly, there's about 3000 psi in there and you might get a nasty surprise. Keep the nipple open until the fluid stops running, then tighten it. The fluid pressure in the system has now been relieved and you can work on the component parts. For example, if you have to change the modulator itself, after relieving the high pressure, you can now disconnect all the hydraulic pipes in safety, but you must protect the open ends from dirt entry. Before refitting the modulator, it's a good idea to remove the bulk of the air from the reservoir like this. Fill it with fluid to the max mark, then carefully tilt the modulator to one side, approximately 45 degrees like this. You can now refit it, and then top up the reservoir and bleed the system in the normal way, using tool SMD 4081. Finally, turn on the ignition and check that the ABS warning light operates correctly. The accumulator on this system is an integral part of the modulator and cannot be renewed separately, but it has to be depressurised like this before disposal. Relieve the high-pressure fluid as we did just now and remove the modulator. Hold it in a vise with this relief plug pointing upwards. Slowly loosen the plug by 3 half turns and then wait for at least 3 minutes until all pressure has escaped. You can now remove the plug completely and dispose of the modulator. If you have to change the fluid in the high-pressure system, do it like this. First, bleed off the high pressure slowly as we showed you just now, then leave the nipple open. Make sure the tube is still in the container and start the engine. Run the engine until the reservoir is empty, then switch off and tighten the nipple. Obviously, air has entered the system during draining, so refill the reservoir and bleed it like this. Fill the reservoir with new fluid to the maximum mark. Start the engine, let it idle until the modulator pump stops, then switch it off. Connect bleed tool SMD 4081 to the maintenance connector under the passenger seat and carry out a bleed procedure just as you would for an ABS 6 system. When you've done that, bleed fluid from the modulator. Then continue to repeat the bleed procedure until you get bubble-free fluid from the modulator. Don't forget to keep the reservoir topped up. Finally, start the engine and check that the ABS warning light goes out. There is one important check that we want to tell you about. The modulator contains a valve which must close the fluid port to the solenoid valves if the high-pressure system fails, so that conventional braking is maintained. Make the check like this. Relieve the high-pressure system, as we showed you before, then raise the car off the ground, wheel-free, making sure it's safe. Get someone to press the brake pedal while you check that none of the wheels can turn. Check that the bleed nipple is tight, then fill the reservoir to the max mark. Pour the fluid slowly and allow air bubbles to disperse. Start the engine and let it idle for at least a minute, then switch off. Check the reservoir level, which should now be below the max mark, and top it up again. Finally, start the engine and check that the ABS warning light goes out. Well, we're nearly at the end of this update video, but before we finish, a quick word about the introduction of the 200 PS turbo engine in the 800. The model is called the Vitesse Sport, and in keeping with this image, the suspension has been modified and lowered. Shorter springs all round give a trim height 20mm lower. Stiffer rate bushes are fitted to the lower arm, and the dampers are modified. Well, that completes this Technician's Update number 5. Thanks for watching.